Okay. Focus should be on getting back to practice as more conditioning time is needed in order to be ready for competition. Coaches should make the most of the time together, communicate pre-practice with athletes and parents, strategy and more in-depth coaching done virtually. It's recommended that practices should not include more than 8 athletes on the field at a time and allows for 1 coach and 1 recommended hygiene coordinator. Assign area that ensures adequate physical distance between each player for them to place their equipment in water so that they can return to during breaks in activity. Between training efforts, maintain a distance of at least 6 feet apart. Take training level of each athlete into account and establish new baseline for each athlete. Coaches should introduce and implement the use of a recovery assessment tool upon arrival and conclusion of each session. The first phase should consist of the following: progression of linear short distance acceleration and deceleration, lateral movement, core training, and low level endurance. Avoid contact drills or any drills that require standing in line. Training sessions or practices during this period should focus on skill concepts, wall ball, ground balls, shooting, passing, and clearing. Build in appropriate time for warm-up and cool down based on length of session. Time spent training should be well planned by coaches or team leaders, timed appropriately to reduce time spent lingering on the field, and efficient. So as we progress throughout the stages, there's 3 stages: red, yellow, and green. Currently, we're past the red stage. Red stage was for at-home training when aligned with state, local, public health guidelines that do not permit or recommend any size group gatherings outside of family members in public settings. Now, for most of us, we're in the yellow stage. Yellow phase. There are 2 stages in the yellow phase. Stage 2 is for small groups, less than 10, modified lacrosse activity for practice at an outdoor facility and is aligned with state, local, public health guidelines that allow for small, under 10 group gatherings in a public or private setting. Social distancing requires are in effect for all aspects of the training. As we move from stage 2 to stage 3, that is for medium group, less than 50 modified intra-squad scrimmages practices with limited closeness and contact at an outdoor facility. This stage is aligned with state, local, public health guidelines and allow for under 10 people to gather in groups indoors at a time or 50 people to gather outdoors at a time. And the final phase is the green phase. That's the phase we're all hoping to get to within the next couple of weeks. Hopefully in Pennsylvania, we'll be within the next 2 weeks. New Jersey, we're hoping for a similar progression. In stage 4 of the green phase, it's for medium groups, less than 50, local competition practices from teams within the same locale, with limited closeness and contact at outdoor or indoor facilities, and no multi-team events. This is aligned with state, local public health guidelines that allow for up to 50 people gathering indoors or outdoors. Finally, we have stage 5. This is for larger group gatherings, more than 50, and full competition resumption with multiple teams from varied geographic areas. This is aligned with state, local public health guidelines that allow for groups larger than 50. So these are the guidelines that U.S. Lacrosse has set forth for parents and athletes as they return back to play during the coronavirus quarantine. The first one is do not bring your child if you or they are recently sick. So in this time, now normally, we always want the players at the field, if they're feeling a little achy, they're feeling a little sore. In the past, we tell them, come to practice, we'll stretch you out. Any type of those symptoms, we want to make sure they stay home. So we're creating an environment where it's okay to stay home and not come to practice if you're not feeling well. It's not worth the risk to yourself, and it's not worth the risk to others. The GMs and coaches will be providing screening questions prior to the first practice. So go through those. If you're, again, checking off any of the symptoms, don't come to practice. Understand your limited participation in practice and games and need to stay in a car. So parents will be dropping players off in their car, and they will not be allowed to come to the sidelines. They'll have to stay in their car at that time again, in an effort to minimize contact between groups of people. There is currently limited research available that determines the risk benefit for athletes to wear a cloth face mask while participating in outdoor or indoor activities. The CDC has provided guidance on the use of cloth face masks. So what that means is, although the coaches will be required to wear face masks during practices, the players do not have to. So don't worry about the players wearing a face mask or anything like that. All of our coaches will have them. All of our coaches will have the proper safety equipment on hand. That should not be an issue for you to worry about. There is no evidence available yet to recommend clear face shields for the use in the prevention of COVID-19 transmission in lacrosse. Clear face shields for use within a helmeted face mask are currently under review by U.S. Lacrosse. Some lacrosse rulemaking bodies prevent the use of face shields in games, so consult the NFHS and NCAA before purchasing. So a lot of companies are coming out those face shields that you wear within the helmet. U.S. Lacrosse is not making it mandatory to wear that, so we're not mandating any of our players have to wear that. If you feel more comfortable, make sure you're checking the NFHS rules and make sure they're compliant with all the proper safety standards before purchasing. Remember to wipe down equipment before and after practice. The CDC has provided cleaning and disinfecting guidelines. I'll provide the links for that afterwards for the GM so they can share that with you. All this information that we're going through tonight can be found on the CDC website or US Lacrosse's website. We ask that everyone cooperates the needs and asks of coaches and organizers during this time. Yeah, it's a new world for all of us, and we're staying up to date with all the new changes from the local governments and the CDC. So we're on top of it, and we're here just to make sure we're complying and we're keeping your kids as safe as possible. Educate your children about the need for social distancing and what they should do to protect themselves. Hand washing, no touching others, keeping 6 feet apart. Monitor children for any symptoms of anxiety, depression, and distress, i.e. not sleeping, eating, stomach aches before practice, and refer to a mental health professional. So this is our safety protocol that all of our coaches have been made aware of, and this is our standard at this time. We're, again, making it known that all participants must stay home if they are feeling sick or experiencing any of the COVID-19 symptoms. Coaches must clean and disinfect frequently touch surfaces and equipment before and after practices. So that's any of the cones, balls, training instruction equipment, and goals. Players cannot share equipment, water bottles, or towels. So the players must come on site fully dressed from their car. They will have a designated area where they can drop off water bottles. We'll make sure they're 6 feet apart from all the other players' water bottles. And when they have breaks, we're going to minimize the amount of time they're standing on the sideline getting water to when we're back in drills and safely distancing them apart. So we have recently purchased infrared thermometers for all of our club GMs. So the player's temperature will be taken prior to them being led onto the field. The temperature of participants must be taken using an infrared thermometer and gloves. Anyone with a temperature of 103 degrees or more must be sent home and evaluated by a licensed medical professional before being cleared to participate. Face masks are required for staff, coaches, and designated adults serving as hygiene support for all practices and activities. Athletes may wear a face mask during lacrosse activity, but will not be required. Modification for aspects of boys and girls game will be made to minimize higher risk activities by limiting extended closeness and contact between athletes. Parents dropping off players must stay in their cars. Players are required to be dressed and ready for practice prior to drop off. And we will designate areas for players to store their own water for practice. and make sure that they maintain distancing during breaks. Emergency action plan. So this is in the event if one of our players or coaches tests positive for COVID-19, we have a plan in place to contact the necessary people and to maintain that safety within the HEADstrong Lacrosse Club. So we will send home any person who is sick, whether or not they have been diagnosed with COVID-19, and we'll do that through the thermometers. So anytime the thermometer reading is over 100.3 degrees, that player will not be allowed to practice. If a player or coach is experiencing any symptoms or feels sick, they are required to stay home. Those showing symptoms at practice will also be sent home. If a player or coach is diagnosed with COVID-19, we will notify other players or coaches who may have been exposed to them. HEADstrong Lacrosse will notify potentially exposed players and coaches of the diagnosis and follow contact tracing procedure of local government. HEADstrong Lacrosse Club will follow all requirements to notify local or state health authorities when players, coaches are diagnosed with COVID-19. We will also be protecting the privacy of those diagnosed. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires the confidentiality of members' medical information. The club may not disclose the identity of the member diagnosed with COVID-19. The club is also required to maintain the privacy of any health information they gather related to the member's medical condition or their symptoms, and such documentation should be kept in a private health folder with limited access by only critical human resource staff. We will not permit the diagnosed player or coach to return to play until they have been cleared by a physician or medical professional. We will continue to require players and coaches monitor themselves for symptoms and stay home if they exhibit any symptoms. And then finally, we have the CDC exposure guideline, which we will be following. So it is the current CDC guideline based on community exposure for people exposed to people with known or suspected COVID-19 or possible COVID-19. So if an individual who has had close contact 6 feet for under or equal to 15 minutes, the exposure to person with COVID-19 who has symptoms in the period from 2 days before symptom onset until they meet criteria for discontinuing home isolation can be laboratory confirmed or clinically compatible illness. Person who has tested positive for COVID-19, laboratory confirmed, but has not had any symptoms in 2 days before the date of specimen collection until they meet criteria for discontinuing home isolation. So the precautions we're going to take is we're going to suspend practice for that player for 14 days and all the players that they've come in contact with for 14 days before we get a clearance from a medical professional from that player. Will we resume practice again? So we're going to stay with the CDC guidelines. We will be following with them as they change and as they grow over the next couple weeks. But in the event where a player or a coach does test positive, we will notify everyone they have been in contact with, and we will suspend practices in an effort to stop the spread of any virus. Hopefully that does not happen, but we will be prepared to take any precaution necessary to keep all the players, families, and coaches safe during the next couple weeks. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions anyone has that I could answer. Feel free to chat in the group, and or just raise your hand and I can answer any questions. I know that there's a lot to take in this time, and I know that it's a really new world for all of us, but we'll definitely get through it together. And if you have any questions that come up over the next couple of days, you can easily email me at tom@HEADstrong, and we'll share any information that we have. So the question is, do parents need to stay in their cars during games? So that is going to be dependent upon the tournament facilities. So during the actual games, the tournaments will determine whether parents are allowed to stay on the sidelines. So for us right now, during practices, parents will need to stay in their cars. What modifications to boys play? So the modifications will be communicated through the GMs and the coaches. So that will be told to the players prior to practice. Really what we're going to be doing is that training and injury prevention protocol for the first couple practices. That way guys and girls are getting better conditioned and acclimated to getting back to play. It's been a long time since anyone's played a full-length game. So the U.S. Lacrosse wants us to gradually get to that point where we can fully practice in scrimmage, regardless of what phase we're in. Will this presentation with details be available? Yes. This PowerPoint presentation will be shared to all the GMs, and they'll share it out to all the families. How likely is it that there will be actually tournament play this summer? As of right now, that's still an unknown. It really depends, I think, on the next couple weeks as we get to the green phase. So in the green phase, you can have participants up to 250 people in the state of Pennsylvania. So really, we just have to hope that there's no continued spikes and that we are safely able to move through the green phase. And that's a decision that the state and local governments will be making in conjunction with the tournament companies. But we've been in contact with them the whole time. We've been getting all the updates, and we'll share them with you as soon as we're made aware of any changes. And that's the next question was any updates on future practice locations. So the practice locations are also impacted in many ways by the phases we're in. So when we get to the green phase, more and more locations will become available to us, and we'll have a better idea of dates, times, and locations of practices. And that will be communicated through the GMs and the coaches for each specific club. Is there practice this week? So that would be communicated depending upon your club and the availability of practice fields. So the GMs and coaches will be communicating practice plans. NJ is categorized specific sports with a risk profile. Any idea if lacrosse is considered medium or high risk? That's what we're still working on, getting that information from the state. And as soon as we have the correct answer, the GMs and coaches will be communicating that out to the families. When will we get the protocol for the tournaments? As soon as we get the information from the tournament directors, we'll share them with the families. If any or all tournaments are canceled, will there be reimbursements? There will be a system in place to address if there's cancellations. They'll be different for each club depending upon the number of practices held. But yes, there will be more information to come on that, and that will be communicated through the GMs and the coaches to the families. Any other questions? Again, if you have any questions that you want to email me directly, my email is tom@headstrong.org, and I'll happily be able to share any information we have with you. U.S. Lacrosse waivers. So the GMs will be providing waivers to all the families to sign prior to start of practice. That is based upon the U.S. Lacrosse insurance plan that all U.S. Lacrosse members have. So we're working on an electronic signature one that can be sent out and just clicked electronically. If not, we'll have print ones that can be sent print and returned to the coaches. Are there any contingency tournaments in mind in New Jersey if can't play in PA? So we're working with all the local clubs on setting up smaller scale events if the larger scale tournaments take place. So we'll have more information on that over the next couple of weeks as we have a better idea of field availability and field locations. But we are working on that currently. When will we know if tournaments are 1 day or 2 days? So that will be communicated to us by the tournaments. I don't have a timeline as to when they'll communicate that information out to us, but as soon as we get that information, we will share it out to you through the GMs and coaches. Will practice frequency increase as we go to green, etc.? So we have to first complete that training and injury prevention, so that way we can slowly acclimate to having more and more practices. We don't want to have too many practices or too many games at the start and risk players getting hurt to, not using the muscle groups that they're used to working this time of year. So as we get more and more along through the progression of yellow to green, and we have more information about field availability, we'll share that information with all the families. Any other questions? You can feel free, again, to email if you're more comfortable with that, or keep sending on chat. I think there's a lot of good information being shared, and I appreciate all the good questions. Yeah, you could feel free to log off if I don't have any other information, but I'll stay on and answer any questions that come along. When should we expect something from our local GMs? This week. We'll have more information out. They'll be able to share all the links and the slides from this presentation this week. Thanks, everyone. There was a question, I could not log on the first 20 minutes. Can you go over what was discussed? So there's a recording of the session. I can send that. It will be sent out to all the GMs, and the GMs will be sending out a recording as well as all of the slides from the presentation.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Mike.